Today we're going to be doing a little bit of a shorter stream. Still feeling pretty tired with my new job and everything, so we're actually just going to be doing a little bit of a shorter stream. But I'm going to try out something a little bit different, something that I've been wanting to try out basically ever since I got started broadcasting, ever since I really even got into StarCraft, which is I want to do some game analysis a la the Day 9 Daily. So I'll be doing some game analysis today of Flash versus Best, going through a replay that I have from a replay pack. I'm not exactly sure how old the game it is, but either way, there's still lots of things that we can learn from it. And even before I actually get into the replay, I just want to explain why we analyze pro games. What's the point of that? Because I know there are a lot of people out there who'll say stuff like, well, what's the point of me looking at a pro game? What's the point of me trying to figure out what pros are doing, why they're hitting particular timings and things like that? How does that help me as a casual gamer? And that's one of those things that we really have to just kind of throw away in our minds, thinking that somehow we're not pros, so whatever they do doesn't relate to us. There's always things to learn from pros, even if you can't hit those timings, even if you don't have the mechanics to necessarily get down a crisp, perfect +2/+1 mech timing at exactly a certain time. It doesn't matter, because they're benchmarks that we can work towards. We know when certain things should hit, when the best type of attacks should happen. It also teaches us to think critically about how we look at the map, how we look at our opponent and the matchups, and how we transition properly. And even if we can't use all of that necessarily in real time, it's still lots of little bits that we can add to our gameplay and just generally make it better. So I think there's a lot to be learned from watching these games. We're going to go ahead and jump into the replay. I have to... One second, let me transition through here, because I still have not quite figured out how to get my webcam to work properly. But we should be good now. Alright, so we're going to go straight into things. It's not a custom game, although I guess technically you can get it from the custom game. Go ahead and load up all the sound. We're going to go into Flash versus Best on Othello. This is going to be our game for today. Alright, so before we do anything, let's just go ahead and take a look at Othello. I'm going to go ahead and restrict the vision here. Alright, so Othello is kind of an interesting map. It's on this Twilight tile set. Let me turn down the music just a bit. The music is usually pretty nice for when we're doing casting. Not so great when you're doing analysis. So let's go ahead and turn that down just a bit. Alright, so what we're going to notice immediately about Othello is it does have this kind of weird, easy, open 3-base layout, which that their base is kind of susceptible to attacks either coming around the top side or coming around the bottom side. So that is one necessary thing to look at, is that their base is, while it is free, it's still quite open to attacks. The other big thing we're going to note is there is tons of drop space on this map. Absolutely tons. So if we just look from Flash's perspective, just going out from here, the natural, here's our natural right here, ridge right above it, susceptible to drops. The only way to get in here without drops of your own is through this little tiny cranny. I believe this is indestructible, so you have to actually walk through here with units, which can be a pain to deal with. So that's our first point of danger right here, is drop over here. We take our third base, then we have this wonderful ridge right above it, which is going to allow things like storm drops and stuff to rain down. You could also drop potentially a Dragoon or two, and that completely locks down this base. So very annoying. As you move outwards, you're either going to take a fourth base in the top, in the 12 o'clock position, or you're going to take it over here in the 9 o'clock position. If you take it over here in the 12 o'clock position, it's right next to this beautiful ridge, which is the high ground main area of this other main base. If you take it over here, It is technically defended over here, so you don't have to worry about that. But you can still drop some stuff over here, behind here. There is the potential for annoying stuff over here as well, so it's hard to set up a defense along this area, along this line, because it's still very susceptible to drops and things like that. Obviously not as much of a problem against Protoss because they don't have very long range things that can shoot over cliffs, aka tanks. If you look at tanks over here can probably, maybe not quite hit a Nexus over here, but they can, actually, yeah, they can. That's definitely a Nexus hit. The Nexus is placed right there. Okay, maybe the Nexus is a little lower. Either way, it can be very, very annoying. The point is, there's tons of drop space on this map. It's going to be very abusable in the future, so we're going to see how Flash goes ahead and does that. That's annoying, it reset. So let's just go ahead and get into this. Flash is up here in the top left-hand corner in the blue, and down here is going to be best. So we're going to see both players kind of play on this idea of drop play and how it works on this particular map, because you can get a lot of different advantages from doing that. And in general, it allows you to play a little bit greedier at home, which, interestingly enough, has the side effect of if you're playing greedier at home, then your opponent can get more damage done with drops. So there's a lot of interesting stuff that goes on in this game. It's going to be very interesting to see how this works. As far as the main bases go and everything is concerned, there is a lot of droppable space over here on the edge, but it's not too bad since this mineral line is right here flush with the corner. You don't have to worry about it too much. It's going to be pretty safe, but as I said, there's a lot of maneuverability around the top and the bot side. So this side is not particularly important. This corner is actually mostly for your own benefit, because as a Terran player, for instance, you can just load up this corner with supply depots, and basically that's 100% safe. It's really this outer edge along the main that we're going to be mostly worried about. So both players are going to be starting off pretty standard. The one thing that we're going to notice about Flash is actually just going to forego gas. He's going to be going for the gasless expand in this particular case. And obviously we're not going to know quite yet, but I've seen this replay before. So basically, by going for a gasless fast expand, you do open yourself up to a lot of potential dangers. And we're going to see how Flash parses through these potential dangers and prepares for them accurately without overcommitting to defense. And that's really just the smart placement of missile turrets and the smart use of money. So unfortunately, he does scout the wrong way first. Doesn't see anything over here, so he's going to go ahead and scout down to the bottom left. Now, for whatever reason, vertical scouts are becoming very common. Like, you scout to the side and then scout vertically the other way. And the reason you do that is because if your opponent is in a close position, you want to know so that you can be prepared on this bunker timing, especially if you're going for a fast expand like this. If your opponent's in a close position, you need to know right away so that you can go ahead and drop a bunker down early so you can deal with that early Dragoon. But if it's cross map, it takes the Dragoon maybe an extra like 5 to 10 seconds to get across the map. You can wait a little bit longer on that bunker, so it's just a small optimization, but this is really obnoxious. Basically, this probe has pretended that this is its own base, but it's obviously not, and gotten a ton of damage on Flash's SCV, and it actually brings it all the way down to 5. So this SCV is in a lot of trouble. It basically can't go scout this base right now because all it takes is one probe on the ramp to kill off that SCV, easy peasy. So at this point in the time, Flash is actually in a little bit of trouble because he's playing a bit in the dark. He's going to be going for the faster bunker. He's got his gas up now, and we're going to be seeing a factory thrown down pretty shortly to make sure he gets that tank out. Pretty interesting that he decides to send out these Marines considering the danger that he could be in. But if there hasn't been like any zealots or anything walking into his base by now, he knows it's probably a pretty standard build. And this is one of those things that you can't possibly know what's up, but if you just use proper timings in your head, say, hey, there was no pressure, so I'm safe. from any early shenaniganry. You're using timestamps to basically make sure that you're safe. And this is our next key component to defending. We're going to go for the eBay. Now, normally you would think to go for the Academy. If you're fairly new to this game, you're thinking, oh no, I don't know what my opponent's doing. I couldn't get a scout into his main. What should I be doing right now? I really need to get some scans up so I can go ahead and scout his main. But Flash isn't so worried about that. He just wants to get the eBay up so he can have missile turrets on time to deal with potential things like DTs or anything like that. And this SCV is actually going to get blocked. Now, what Flash doesn't know, but we're going to take a peek at, is there are actually DTs on the way. And this all comes from when Best managed to shave off a lot of the SCV health over here. He basically made a quick decision, let's just go ahead and go for fast DTs since my opponent can't scout it. But Flash is preparing perfectly. He's got this missile turret in place, and with this missile turret, if we actually pause right here, this missile turret is actually perfectly placed. There could not be a better place for this to actually be. Hey Foxhan, there is a tournament in 4 hours. I may cast that. But let's go ahead and look at this missile turret. So what's beautiful about this missile turret is it is primarily a DT turret. It's at the front. It's designed to stop DTs from getting into the natural, getting into the main, and dealing big damage. And he doesn't have a missile turret in his main. So he obviously was preparing first for DTs. But one other thing we really need to look at is the positioning of this, because the positioning of this is honestly absolutely brilliant. It is designed in such a way where it not only protects from the DTs coming into the base, but it also prevents drops to some degree, because you can because Reaver drops can't really drop onto this high ground right here. They have to drop somewhere on this low ground, and when you place the missile turret right here, it basically protects all of this area right here. So you can't really drop a Reaver over here. If you drop a Reaver all the way over here, the SCVs can easily come over here, and this will just get deflected. You can't drop over here because obviously it's in range of the bunker and the missile turret. And generally dropping behind the mineral line is not very good because the Scarabs have a tendency to get stuck on minerals. So there is a potential drop zone right here and right here, but they are not ideal for the Protoss player. Everything else is defended by this missile turret, and that's what's really beautiful about this. So that's going to go ahead, if his opponent goes for some sort of a Reaver drop or something like that, he knows now that he sees these two Dragoons at the front, he doesn't have to worry about any sort of crazy shenaniganry. It's going to be going straight for the tanks to go ahead and push this away. The follow-up on the 2-fact is really, really nice. It just allows him, it's pretty standard, but it just allows him to go ahead and start pumping out units and get his defenses up. In the meantime, he's also going to be getting up that Academy and going for the scout afterwards, now that he generally kind of knows what his opponent did. He managed earlier, if we look at this, actually it may not show, but when he scouted in with his SCV, he just barely caught a glimpse of the Nexus, and that was going down at a pretty normal time. So he has a pretty good idea of what his opponent is up to. He's not going to be too surprised about the potential of any sort of like crazy one base play. I think if he had not scattered a Nexus there, he probably would have double bunkered up and built a second missile turret up in his main. So now that siege mode is up, that's going to be able to push this back. I'm going to go ahead and turn down the volume a little bit for this as well. There we go. Just a little bit loud. It's crowding out my voice a bit. And so behind this, the first DTs are going to be out. There's two. And it should be easily deflected by Flash. He's got this very nice SimCity. He's got the missile turret in a great position. The only thing that he might be worried about is potential drops, but that's why this eBay is over here spotting. So first two DTs are going to come in, and actually they come right over here. Not too big of a deal. Does find a small space right here to harass, but with this scans up just in time, he's able to easily deflect that and kill it off. Second DT is probably going to be coming in here too, but Flash is just on top of the money on all that. Because the missile turret is here, the DT can't actually get into the main ever. The best thing that Best could hope for is just hanging out in this pocket. I love this supply depot. It's just a minor thing, not only to close off this gap where he lifts the barracks, but also just to go ahead and create that wall, prevent any future run-bys from happening. And now you'll see that he's got his first couple vultures out. He's going to be going ahead and setting up this third to take it with these spider mines, rather. So the third base, because he knows that he did a lot of damage, typically after this, you would go into an armory, and then you would build 2 more factories here, and then you would get a third base a little bit later. But because he managed to deflect that DT so much, because he knows that his opponent has a rather weak ability to actually put pressure on him at this point in time, he's just going to go ahead and reverse that timing, go ahead and get the command center a little bit earlier. He's going to get his factories a little bit later, which is totally good for him because he's not going to be going for an early timing, as we're going to see. He's going to be waiting very, very long until he has all the proper upgrades, until he has all the economy that he needs to actually push out of his base. So Best really overcommitted to these DTs. He made up to 4 DTs, which is going to make his ground pressure a lot weaker, and he still doesn't even have an observatory up. So basically, these vultures are untouchable right now. They can go anywhere on the map, they can lay some mines, and prevent the Protoss player from ever actually moving out of their base, which is a very nice feature at this point in the game. So he's going to try a little cute play. This is something you can do where you just kind of run at Dragoons and drop spider mines on top of them, because in straight combat vultures suck versus the Dragoons. But overall, pretty nice micro from Best. Manages to soak up most of those mine shots while killing off all the vultures. But honestly, vultures are basically free, so Flash doesn't mind trading a couple of vultures for a couple of Dragoons. And basically at this point, he's just trying to scout out any potential hidden bases and get a read on his opponent. Meanwhile, we have the +1 attack coming and the extra 2 factories done now. So this is the point in the game where we're basically just gonna sit and wait, because there's not really anything to talk about in terms of what Flash is doing, because Flash is really not going to be doing anything. All he's mostly worried about doing right now is just going to be turtling up, making sure that he can get these 3 bases up in mining without taking any damage from his opponent. On the Protoss side, we're going to be expecting to see Stargate play. That is very typically the follow-up, and Flash is going to want to be keeping a very close eye on that. I heard a scan, I'm not exactly sure where it went down. There it is. Basically, Flash is just going to be continuing to scan the main over and over and over and find out what his opponent is doing. I think he scouted this Reaver drop, so he knows that this follow-up Reaver drop is coming. It's pretty interesting to go for the follow-up Reaver drop after the DTs. If we just pause for a second. Normally when you expect to see DTs, like when you see early DTs like that, you expect, if they don't do any pressure, the natural follow-up is going to be DT drops. You just go ahead, transition into the robotics facility, go ahead and get your observer, and then just grab a Reaver, or sorry, just grab a shuttle while you're there, and you can just start dropping in the main and start going in to your opponent's mineral line. If they don't have a missile turret there, they basically lose the game. However, in this particular case, Flash smartly put these 2 spider binds here earlier, which are going to do a very good job at deflecting potential DTs, and also 1 more missile turret to help him detect. And the fact that, again, it's out in this open, so it has a pretty long sweep range, and you can just it allows you to control this area a little bit better, whereas the 2 mines make up for no missile turret being over here. If the GT does somehow get into the mineral line, get behind the main, they don't really have a lot of places to run. They can't run behind the mineral line because of this very smart wall off that Flash has done, and can't really run up here too well. So basically, 1 scan over here is going to kill DTs very, very easily, no matter how slippery they might be. So it's actually very smart that Best goes for this Reaver drop. It's kind of unexpected. You don't expect to see this, and because you've already placed your missile turret in more of a defensive location, either in your mineral line or a little bit further back from this ledge, it's a lot easier for the shuttle to go in and get some damage done. So basically, we're going to follow this. Can we follow this? Does this game allow me to follow? Control F? No. Okay, whatever. I'm trying to remember all of the observer buttons. So this Reaver is going to be taking down that missile turret, which is going to make future drops a little bit easier getting in here. And you can see Flash is quite worried about the potential for DT follow-up. But this is actually a pretty nice drop overall from Best. I don't think he actually gets any damage done here, but it has forced Flash to put his attention elsewhere and try to focus on this drop, which is the whole point of Reaver drops. Reaver drops are very strong in the sense that they force your opponent to respond while you go ahead and take a free third base as a Protoss player. But one thing we do need to think about while all of this is going on, what is Best going to be doing behind this? So we're going to be looking, Flash is basically just going to be non-stop scanning and trying to look for the Stargate, trying to make sure what his opponent is going to be doing. Is he going to be going into faster carriers and going for a carrier strategy, or is he going to be sticking to something more like Arbiters, the standard mass expand Arbiter style, where you get tons of gateway units and just try to barge down the front door and kill your opponent? Again, also, very smart to go for drop play on this map because, as we talked about, drop play is very influential on this map. Unfortunately, only Dragoons and High Templar are going to be very useful on these high grounds, but something to look out for, a couple High Templar up here can be absolutely devastating, which, again, is why Flash is absolutely on top of all his scouting, always has a barracks in the right place. He's going to be sending a couple units up here later on just to get vision. So it's overall, Flash is just playing to the map very, very well so far. And this drop is just trying to shark around, try to get some damage done. At best, it will just kill off a couple missile turrets, but that's really not a big deal for Best. He doesn't mind not getting damage because it allows him to just get this third base up for free. And this is one of those things where this missile turret is here, but because it doesn't have vision on the high ground, you can still drop up here. But with this SCV now, the Flash is totally safe. And you can see +1 is about to start finishing up, and so he's going to start +2 very shortly. And that's going to allow him to get a very strong timing coming up with +2/+1. And we're going to see that immediately when it happens. So, actually going to be going for dropships instead of science vessels. Now, he's scanned his opponent over and over and over. The Stargate's only just going down. Normally, if we're seeing a carrier build, carriers are already building, and maybe even 2 are already out. Because this has been severely delayed, not only by the earlier DT tech, but also by the follow-up Robo tech, follow-up Reaver tech. So it's basically put Best in a position where all of his tech is delayed, and by the time that he gets either Arbiters or carriers, they're going to be so much later that it's going to be very ineffectual against Flash's push. And Flash knows this because all he's really focused on right now is just making sure that he's safe. You see all these supply depots right here? It basically forces the Zealots to funnel through here and makes it much easier to deal splash damage to them. It makes it a lot easier for the spider mines to get good hits, and the same for the siege tanks. And behind that, he's just trying to make sure that he has missile turrets in good areas that are going to protect a large area, not just the immediate vicinity. And also putting up missile turrets in his main. He wants to make sure that he doesn't get mass dropped in his main or recalled in here. So he's going to be putting those down. And this is a very subtle thing, but something that really honestly shouldn't be overlooked. Look at how he's placing these supply depots. Normally you would see Terrans just go ahead and placing all their supply depots in rows, etc. like that. And as I talked about earlier, it's really nice having all this building room up here because you can just start building tons and tons of supply depots. But what Flash is instead doing is he wants to go ahead and start SimCitying his base a little bit. So like I said, at the front here where it has these little tunnels that filter through units, the same thing is going to go in his main base in case he gets Arbiter dropped. By having these little funnels, it allows him to siege up over here and easily kill off units. Now you might say that's like a little bit dangerous because you're going to be doing splash damage to your buildings. Yes, but it's far more worth it, and using these cheap supply depots to do it is totally worth it. So Flash is just going to be turtling ultra hard. He's got a couple of early Goliaths, and I think that has a dual purpose, not only to help him deflect these drops, but in the potential of a fast carrier play. Now, I'm not sure if he's actually scouted the Stargate yet, but he should know that the tech is quite delayed after seeing all of this go down, and he's going to be trying to continually scan and get information on his opponent's base, see what his opponent is actually building, because this is the turning point where either Protoss goes Arbiter or they go Carrier. But you kind of expect with this faster Templar Archives to be going for the Arbiter tech, which is what Best is going to be doing. And meanwhile, Flash is just going to be turtling ultra hard. Now, I want you to notice one small detail here, and that is that Flash is not sieging up all his tanks. He only has a couple of siege tanks. The rest of them are sitting unsieged. Now, this is a small, again, a very subtle thing, where Flash is allowing himself to remain mobile. By having these unsieged tanks, he basically, if there's a drop or anything in the main, he can quickly relocate over here. He doesn't need a ton of it at his front. If he sees pressure at his front, he'll go ahead and move some tanks up and siege them up. But otherwise, he's just going to be playing very passively, making sure that he stays mobile. Now, this double dropship is going out. This double dropship is actually really brilliant. It's going to allow him to go ahead and start dropping onto the high ground areas against his opponent. Unfortunately, Best is a little bit late getting over here, and there's actually just going to be tons of spider mines on this ramp, so you can't actually get up here with gateway units. Now there's going to be units up on the high ground. Best tries to go ahead and storm drop over here, but this honestly wasn't the best use of it. He was really worried about potentially losing this base. But let's think about this for a second. This is a mineral only base, right? So worst case scenario, you lose this base, you lose a little bit of mineral mining. It's really not all that bad, especially when you have this base going up as well. You can easily just transfer your probe straight over to the other base. It's a little unfortunate to not be proactive and lose this base, but you have to kind of, on this map, you kind of have to expect that a base like this is going to be in danger. You're going to have to probably abandon this if you lose control of that high ground for any moment in time. So I think as soon as Flash got up here with units, Best really should have just gone ahead and abandoned that idea, and probably maybe even counter storm dropped over here. You can go ahead and drop a Zealot or two, and then drop a High Templar, go ahead and storm this mineral line, get tons of damage. You could also potentially try to get a storm drop off over here. You may have to suicide a shuttle, but you can potentially get a lot of damage over here as well. Flash just absolutely insane positioning on these missile turrets, by the way. Just, they cover everything. It's actually crazy how good his missile turret placement is. It's right there, and there's like a small area through here which just runs into more turrets. It's beautiful. In any case, because he's trying to get up here on top of this high ground, he ends up losing quite a bit in the process, and ends up taking more damage than he really should. These Dragoons getting stuck on the ramp weren't able to do anything, and eventually just decides to go ahead and start giving up this space. He's tried more drops up here, but because this wasn't coordinated with the rest of his Dragoons, it really wasn't very good. And he's got to abandon the space anyway, so not very well played by Best, and kind of, I think, reacting in the wrong way against his opponent. Just make sure your opponent doesn't counter by getting their own base, and you're okay. You can go ahead and sack this base, even though your Protoss, you really want to stay ahead in bases. It's okay to go ahead and sack this and just retake it a little bit later, or even just expand up to here, because your opponent can't do anything about it at this particular point in time. But we are going to note one more thing. So Flash really committed to that drop, which did take a decent chunk out of its supply, but he's still going all the way up to 170. He's still in fantastic shape, and we're going to look at his upgrades. He's got +2 attack on the way, +1 armor. As soon as this finishes, we're going to see him unsiege and start moving out across the map. In the meantime, he's just going to continue to harass and be annoying with these vultures. Like I said, vultures are basically free. So if you're trading vultures for Dragoons, you're doing really nicely. He comes back in with even more drops, and again, Best is late to get here. This is one of those things where, as a Protoss player, you really need to go ahead and just preemptively drop like 2 or 3 Dragoons up in this high ground, because it will save you so much headache. This particular area is kind of the most pivotal area for Protoss. This is the 3rd base area. It also controls flow into the 4th base. So getting 6 siege tanks down here on the high ground is basically a game-winning move for Flash. It honestly doesn't even matter what comes next. At this point in the game, Flash has won because he's managed to get these tanks up on the high ground. He's going to be able to prevent his opponent from getting anything else up here, and this is absolutely disastrous for Best, who just doesn't have a response to it, honestly. And this is again one of those things where I'd love to see a counter High Templar drop over here or something to keep his opponent from just runaway expanding like this. Best does have a pretty nice line of vision across the map. If we look, he's got eyes on this map, on this side. He's got a couple of key observers in the middle of the map to scout what his opponent's doing. He's got a couple of High Templars over here, which looks like he planned to use at a potential drop at this base, but he really hasn't had the chance to do that yet. And this one gap in his vision allowed Flash to go ahead and bring all these 3 dropships full of tanks over here. And this is one of those problems where you really have to make more observers than you really want, because if you skimp out on observers, if you only make 3 or 4 observers, you're going to be in pretty bad shape. And all of these probes actually just sitting around not doing anything. First Arbiter is out, but it doesn't even matter because right now Flash is about to hit +2/+1, and as soon as that finishes, he's going to siege up and just go for it. Good storms are going to allow him to do a little bit of damage, but again, this is one of those things I really want to point out. Not sieging up all the siege tanks, only sieges up to the siege tanks, the rest left unsieged, so he can quickly kill off all these ground units. And these 2 siege tanks are just going to be focusing on focusing down probes. And meanwhile, back at home, we're going to see +1 about to finish. And Flash has completely unsieged everything. He's just going to be moving out, well, apparently, except for that one. He's just going to be moving out very offensively now. Pushing straight out across the map, even scanning to kill off the observer. So Best is in a lot of trouble now because he still hasn't dealt with this. He's still got to deal with this with his drop play, but at the same time he's got a gigantic army coming across the map, and he doesn't really have any gateway units. This is quite a low, well actually I guess the gateway count is pretty decent at this point. I think these last 2 just got added on, so he's in a position where his economy got delayed over here. He didn't really send it up to here in time. He didn't really decide to take another base, and then again delayed over here. And he's lost quite a few gateway units in the process just trying to clean these up. And as a result, Flash has taken a pretty decisive lead in the overall unit count at 170 supply versus 150. And Best is still just trying to clean this up, but honestly, it doesn't even matter because Flash is just going to pick up and combine with the rest of his army. And I'm honestly not even sure if Stasis is done yet. Okay, Recall is done, or Recall is going, so I think Stasis might be done. But either way, this is just a gigantic army, and if you don't kite this back and prevent the siege ups before it gets to your base, you just straight up die. And that's what we're going to see right here. Again, notice Flash sieges up 2 siege tanks, everything else unsieged. He doesn't have to worry about having too many siege tanks up and sieged because his opponent doesn't have a lot of dragoons. This is a primarily zealot force, and against a zealot force, a bunch of zealots that are right on top of your tanks, you want to go ahead and just stay unsieged because you do a lot more damage. Those were some really nice storms that thinned out this tank count and did a lot of damage, but the problem still remains that there's a science vessel here for all of this detection, and the tanks have basically cleaned up everything. This one siege tank will be able to clean up the rest of the dragoons, and with more and more reinforcements coming out across the map, there's not really a whole lot that Best can do at this particular point in time. He's trying to go for a couple of these stasises on the tanks to make cleaning this up a little bit easier. And honestly, this defense is a bit on the knife's edge. It's really close to Best actually defending it, and if he had another stasis, he could actually just completely delete this right now. But look at the difference behind this. The difference behind this is Flash went ahead and expanded up here to the 12 o'clock and to the 9 o'clock while pushing out. So even if this does get cleaned up, he's going to be on 5 bases versus his opponent who's only going to be mining from 4. And the main is almost pretty much mined out. It's pretty dry. Natural's still decent, but actually a lot of... Looks like actually a misclick from Best that might come back. That might be one of the reasons why his gateway forces were a little bit thinned out. Just not very good control on these probes, sending them back to the mineral lines properly. So even though he does have these 2 bases mining on the sides, his natural is looking a little bit messed up. His main, there's almost no probes in it, and the main is almost mined out. And this base is completely forfeit. So he's always going to be behind in the economy and war from now on. And against mech units, you really can't afford to be playing behind in economy. You have to be ahead in economy. You have to have the map control to cut your opponent back and pull them back into their base. So basically at this point, Flash has won the game. And it all comes down to that one drop that he did right here. This one drop ended the game entirely because it forced Best to commit so many resources to actually defending it that he wasn't able to stop the push that was coming right down his mid. And again, it's also because of that failed pressure at the beginning. We had the DTs into the Reaver drop, both of which Flash deflected absolutely perfectly. He was able to deflect both the Reaver tech and both the High Templar tech with just a few well-placed missile turrets and mines. So that's really what all this comes down to. The other main thing that we see, again, is just lots of unsieged tanks, and it really does make a pretty huge difference. And he's just going to be cleaning up the rest of these units. Once the next wave of reinforcements comes in, this should be cleaned up and should be GG. And that's basically just Flash playing to his strengths. He's going to play very turtily in the early game, but once he gets that +2/+1, hitting that really miraculously good timing allows him to just clean up. And should be the GG in just a second. Best believes, man. He believes. GG. Alright, so that is the end of that. As you can see, whoops, I didn't mean to restart the replay. Well, okay, it doesn't really matter. In any case, as you can see, the main feature that I'm talking about on Othello, obviously these high ground areas that just cause so much trouble, and that was basically the end of Best. Every single time he tried to do something, Flash was just on top of it with just those 2 or 3 dropships being able to completely shut down his opponent. And that's one of those things you have to prepare for when you go onto a map. Always think about the map architecture and how you can abuse it, how your opponent can abuse it, and you have to play around that. Make sure that your defense is good. Like, for instance, we saw Flash completely deflect everything with a missile turret here and a missile turret here. That was literally all he needed to deflect all of the drop pressure at his natural. Whereas there was still tons of room for Flash to go ahead and get up in here. There wasn't something like a pylon block up at the top of this ramp. There wasn't an observer in place to see this push coming on time, etc., etc. So just a little bit of failed attempts from Best to really defend properly in the same way that Flash was able to defend properly. And that's really the preparation that we see from Flash basically on every single map. Flash just absolutely insane at preparing for what his opponent is going to be doing and knowing what's going to come. That's something that we can learn from, something that we can use.